Hi, you can't see it matches my eye look and my sports bra, but that's okay. All right, you guys, I'm super excited for today's video. It is going to be my third update for my Pan That palette. If you don't know, this is my first year attempting a Pan That palette. I feel like I needed to do this for myself to sort of like round out my project panning experience, if you will, and I selected the Abh Sultry palette as my Pan That palette. This is one of my favorite, most used palettes in my collection, even before starting the Pan That palette, and it's getting older in my collection, so I really wanted to see what I could do. I also have watched a lot of Pan That palettes. A lot of people do ABH palettes, and they seem to be like an easier formula to pan as well. So I thought it would be a good starter palette for a Pan That palette. I also feel like it's very everyday approachable. So I'm super excited for today's update. I feel like it is much more exciting than my last update. Although I only have one new pan to share, I am very excited about my progress, and I'm just excited to continue on with trying to use up as much of this palette as I can. I have noticed quite a few of my shades are definitely drier than they used to be. Like, they are dry. So at the end of the year, no matter where I'm at with this palette, this will be getting decluttered. So I just want to get as much use and love out of a favorite palette as I can before that time has come. So if you're interested in my update on my Pan That palette for 2023, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content or just chit-chatting about makeup, if you like palette themed content, we also just came off of a palette week where every single day for 7 straight days I posted some sort of palette themed content. So I'll leave my palette playlist down below as well. I hope you consider subscribing before moving on, and other than that, let's jump into the video. I feel like every time I sit down to film my update, I like forget how I did my first update. So every update might look a little bit different, but when we started this project, I will post a picture on the screen of what the palette looked like at the introduction. And after the first update, we were able to hit a pan on one new shade. Last update, we had no new pans. It was not a very exciting update. And here is a picture of where my palette is today versus last month. So I'm hoping you'll be able to tell from the picture there is some really exciting progress. I do have one new pan in the shade Rose Quartz, and I do feel like I've expanded the pan on at least a few shades. I myself, before I'm filming this or as I'm filming this, have only taken the pictures that I need to take, but I haven't compared them to the previous pictures that were last month's update. So I'm not entirely sure the exact progress on some of these shades, but I know I've made some good progress, and I'm very excited to share that with you guys. One of you recommended in my introduction that each month of the year I try and use each pan in the palette at least that many number of times. So like, for example, in January, use each of the shades at least one time, in February two times, and so on and so forth. So I have given myself the goal to do that at least through June of this year. I feel like by midway through the year, I might be feeling a little bit burnt out by the palette, and I don't know if I'll continue doing that past June, but I did reach my goal and hit 3 uses per shade in this palette, at least 3 uses. I do also want to add like 2 or 3 focus shades going forward. So maybe shades that I want to use at least 10 times going forward. But let's get into my progress on each of the shades. So I will post some B-roll footage on the screen as we go along. So up first we have the shade Fresh, and I am so close to being done with Fresh. I was really hoping that maybe I could have this shade as complete this update, but alas, that was not my fate. I am really hopeful, but not 100% certain that I will be able to clear this shade out and have this as my first completely empty pan by the next update. I reached for Fresh 21 times in March. By the way, I reached for the Sultry palette 21 total times in March. And I have reached for Fresh 61 total times in this project. And this shade already had a pan when we started, so it actually kind of makes me a little bit nervous and a little bit terrified just thinking about finishing up the rest of these shades, seeing that I've used this 61 times and it's still not a complete shade. I just used this as an all over lid setting shade. While I feel like the rest of the shade should go really quickly, I just don't know if that's going to be the case. Moving on to the shade Pearl, I know I have expanded the pan quite a bit here, which makes me super excited. I normally use this as an inner corner highlight. In fact, it's pretty much the only inner corner highlight I've used on my eyes this year, but I did try this out as a shoulder highlight once this last update, and that expanded the pan quite a bit. This is a bit of a crumbly shade, so I do feel like I will be able to clear this pan out in its entirety as well, which is super exciting. I did reach for this shade a total of 16 times since the last update. We had a total of 33 uses for this project, which is super exciting. Again, I do believe I will be able to clear this shade out. Moving on to Steampunk, this shade definitely has me a little bit worried. I reached for Steampunk 3 total times, putting me at 7 total uses for this project. I feel like March would have been a good opportunity to get some good use out of a gold shade, but I didn't reach for it that much. Although I will say I have found a look that I really like creating with Steampunk, Birch, and Teak. So I am thinking I am going to make Steampunk a focus shade for this next month and see if I can use that 10 times and see where we're at. Get a better dip going in that. I don't necessarily know Steampunk will be a shade that I clear out, but I do at bare minimum want to hit pan on every single shade in this palette. So we definitely have some work to do here. Next up, we have the shade Rose Quartz, which is our newest pan in this palette, which I'm so excited about. I reached for Rose Quartz an additional 6 times this update, putting me at 20 total uses in this project. And I will say it took me much longer to hit pan on this eyeshadow than I thought it was going to. I actually ended up using this once as a shoulder highlight as well, and then I mixed it with like a little bit of body oil, and I really loved the way that that looked. We'll see if I end up doing that anymore. I do really enjoy this shade all over the lid as well. I do feel like I will have to get a little bit creative with using this as a body highlight some this summer in order to actually clear that shade out, but I really would like to clear Rose Quartz out because it is one of my favorite shades in the pan or in the palette. So that's our progress there. Moving on to Ember, another shade that makes me a little bit nervous. I reached for this an additional 3 times since the last update, putting me at 9 total uses. I don't feel like this one gets as the dip isn't as significant in this one as I feel like it is in some of my other shades, and I feel like I've used this one more than some of my other shades. I don't think I'll be clearing out the shade Ember by any means, so that's my progress with that. Moving on to the shade Bloom, which was one of my least used shades within this palette. Going into this project, I reached for this 7 total times since the last update, putting me at 14 total uses, which I'm really happy about, but also I feel like it looks like I've made no effort in this shade. This is a shade I think I'll get a ton of use out of this spring and summer, but this is a drier shade as well, and it's just like I can tell the quality in that one is declining. And then I actually used this shade to create the eye look that I have today. I mixed this with the ColourPop Creamsicle Quad, and I really like the way that this look turned out. I've also mixed this Bloom shade with some of the other shades in this palette to kind of warm it up a little bit, and I found some good ways to use Bloom or to get creative with Bloom, but if you guys have any other suggestions, leave me your comments down below. Moving on to Birch. Birch is a shade, Birch I've reached for 10 additional times since the last update, putting me at 32 total uses in this project. I will be interested to see how much the pan has expanded. I feel like it's expanded quite a bit, but then I also feel like this could be one of those shades where I think it's expanded quite a bit and it actually hasn't. This is a shade that when I use this shade, I feel like I use a lot of it. So I am hopeful that I can clear this shade out in its entirety, but I do think it will be a challenge, and I'm just excited to continue to see how I continue on with this shade. Moving on to the bottom row, we have the shade Cinder. I like this shade, I just struggled to reach for this. I reached for it 4 total times since the last update, putting me at 10 total times within this 10 total uses within this palette. Disturbance and the beginnings of a dip here, but I do still think we have a ways to go with this shade. Moving on to the shade Twig, I've reached for Twig 4 total times, putting me at I reached for Twig 4 times since the last update, putting me at 10 total uses in this project. Twig used to be a favorite shade of mine, and I don't love it like I used to, although I will say I am finding different shades to mix this with to make me like it a little bit more. I feel like I've expanded the pan maybe just slightly, but I'll be interested to see the progress photos to see for sure. Moving on to Teak. Teak I reached for 3 times since the last update, putting me at 11 total uses within this project. Teak is a pan that I want to make a focus shade for the next month, because I would really love for this to have a pan next month. I think it's doable. I think it's possible, but it's definitely going to take some effort. I feel like it has a good dip going on it. I feel like I'm maybe like halfway to the pan, but just knowing how long it took me to hit pan on rose quartz, it's going to take effort to hit pan on teak. I'm hoping to reach for this at least 10 total times this month, and we will see where we end up. Moving on to Dystopian. Dystopian, I reached for 12 total times since the last update, putting me at 26 total uses in this project. This is another really dry shade. I have been using this to fill in my brows some. I've been using this to deepen up looks, and I've actually been using this to fill in my hairline as well. I'm trying to find creative ways to get use out of this pan. This is going to be a challenge to use up, especially just considering how dry and dusty and chalky it is. But I would be really, really proud of myself if I could complete this pan in its entirety and clear this out. That is definitely a goal for me. So we'll see how we end up with that. Moving on to Cyborg, another shade that makes me just so incredibly nervous. I only reached for the shade 3 times this month, putting me at 6 total uses. I feel like a part of me wants to use Cyborg as an eyeshadow that I experiment with as a nail polish. I've never tried that, but maybe that'll be a way that I can get some extra use out of Cyborg. I don't know. You guys will have to leave me your thoughts down below. I also just need to like actually create some beautiful cool toned looks with that used as a shimmer all over my eyes, but that just hasn't been what I have been doing, so I need to figure out a way to hit pan on that. Moving on to a shade that makes me even more nervous on how I'm going to hit pan is the shade Slate. I reached for this 3 times as well, putting me at 6 total uses in this project. This is a matte shade, so I just feel like it's going to be even more difficult for me to find ways to use this, especially because gray is just a shade that I don't reach for. So if you guys have ideas for this gray shade, let me know. Other than just like a cool tone smoky look, let me know if you have any other creative ways that I can get use out of this, but I am kind of stuck on this one. It's the shade that makes me most nervous and least confident on how I'm going to hit pan on that. And then finally we have the shade Nior, which I reached for 3 total times since the last update, putting me at 7 total uses. I think I'll be able to hit pan in Nior. I've also used this mixed with Dystopian as a hairline to fill in my hairline, and I've used it as like to tightline or to go over like a winged liner, but I think I'll just hit pan on this, and that's really it. I definitely know I won't be clearing that shade out, and I'm okay with that. I don't really reach for black shades all that frequently, but that one also makes me just a little bit nervous. Not as nervous as Slate, but definitely a little bit nervous. So those are the 14 shades and my update on each shade. Like I mentioned, I want my focus for the next month to be the shade Steampunk, Teak, and Birch. I would love to see a really nice expanded pan on Birch, maybe like the size of, would love to see Birch the size of what Pearl looks like now. Would love to hit pan on Teak and then have a really good dip going at the bare minimum in Steampunk. I might just end up doing Mondays and Fridays are my really, really early days at work. So it's always night, like Mondays and Fridays, I like to just go into my morning makeup routine with a very specific, quick look in mind. So maybe I'll just have to make my Steampunk, Teak, and Birch look my like go-to Monday, Friday look. Maybe that'll just have to be what happens. But I'm hoping to reach for Steampunk and Teak at least 10 times, and then maybe Birch. I'm gonna give myself a bit of a stretch goal since I should have no problem reaching for that 10 times. I would love to reach for Birch a minimum of 15 times, so I want to do 20. Let's see how 15 goes and see where we land, and then maybe I'll give myself a 20 use goal for April. Birch is a very easy shade for me to incorporate day to day, so we're gonna say 15 for Birch, 10 for Teak, 10 for Steampunk, hoping to have a pan at least in Teak, but very excited to have added a new pan to this palette. I am now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6 pans out of 14, so one more pan and we will have half of the palette with pan, which will be so exciting. Very excited already to get back to work on this and to give you guys my next update. Again, goal will be to at least use each shade in this palette 4 times since we will be in the 4th month of the year. But that is going to wrap it up for today's Pan That Palette update. Would love to know if you guys are doing a Pan That Palette and how it's going. Would love your feedback on suggestions on any creative ways that you have for me to use any of the shades within this palette. I love your guys' suggestions. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.